Hello. Welcome to North Country History with Rob Burg. I'm Rob, and this week we're celebrating Christmas. It's December 25, 2025, and that is also the one-year anniversary of this podcast. I launched it on December 25 of last year, 2024, and so as the one-year anniversary, we're going to look at Christmas in a logging camp, as told by John W. Fitzmaurice, a writer who had spent time in logging camps in the 1880s. And we're going to share today an account he had of a particular camp in the winter of 1883. So settle in, sit back, and enjoy. North Country History with Rob Burg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. Before we begin talking about John Fitzmaurice celebrating Christmas in a logging camp, I just want to give you a brief update on the podcast. Originally, Season 3 was to begin in just about 10 days on January 5th, 2026. However, there's going to be a little bit of a hiatus in the production and of the Season 3 and launching it. Unfortunately, I had a sad situation just very recently happen. My 93-year-old mother passed away. And she lived a fantastic life, and we're celebrating her life. We're not mourning our loss of her. But I've just been, my mind hasn't been on the podcast. So I've had to shut it down for a little bit. I always intended to record this episode, and thankfully I found the time to be able to do that and sharing it with you today. But there will be a Season 3. It's just not starting in January as initially planned. I hope to have it launched in February, but we will see how everything goes. I have to record episodes. I have to interview some people still. And we'll get it going when we get it going. And if I don't have a specific launch date for it, I will try to continue with special episodes on once or twice in January. Same thing in February if it doesn't launch right away then. So we're still doing the podcast. It's just on a little bit of a hiatus. Listen to older episodes. Maybe we'll share some of that in different ways, just kind of like summer reruns of the old TV days of the 70s and 80s. So anyways, we've got that editorial part out of the way, and we're going to get right into the podcast episode, Christmas in a Logging Camp. And to kind of set it up, I want to tell you just a little bit of who John Fitzmaurice was and why he ended up out in the forest in the 1880s, the forests of northern Michigan in the 1880s. John Fitzmaurice was a newspaperman, as he self-described himself. I don't know if that means he was a reporter, he was an editor, he was a printer. All I know is that he suffered from lung ailments, and his doctor at the time, and I believe it was in Bay City, throughout the book he never mentions what town he's from, where he's at. He'll always put like a straight line across, and you have to infer where it's at. But I believe he was out of Bay City, and his doctor recommended that he get into the forest. The fresh, clean air of the Northwoods was always considered a cure-all for any type of lung ailment. And cities had a lot of smoke in the air. You heated your homes. You cooked with wood or coal fires in the stoves in your home. Larger buildings had coal-fired boilers for steam heat. If you were working in a factory, the power was generated by steam engines. So that was also burning wood or smoke or wood or coal. Needless to say, there was a lot of smoke in the air. And then you had different industries that contributed more pollution, maybe not necessarily air pollution, but bad smells, water pollution, a lot of filth. If you had any type of animal-based industry, things like meat packing plants, slaughterhouses, leather tanneries, all of that used a lot or had a lot of offal, a lot of, the leavings of the animals. When you took the meat, you left everything else, and they used them in different ways. And that was not good for the lungs, of course, either, breathing in all of that noxious air. And so going to the forest was always an important thing for your health. And we'll touch on that more in one of the planned episodes of Season 3 on Birch Lodge, a retreat in in the Upper Peninsula that I stayed at in August of this past year on my podcast tour. But anyways, we will get into John Fitzmaurice specifically. And he was encouraged to go in the forest. Well, he had to figure out how to make money going into the forest because he certainly did not have the physique of a lumberman, of a lumberjack, a logger. He was rather slight in size. He was older. I believe he was probably in his 30s at this point, but was considered an old man when going into the logging camps. So his doctor was in a hospital in Bay City, and that's why I suspect Bay City, because the hospital sold or had hospital tickets that were sold to the loggers out in the camps, and it was basically a form of health insurance. You bought a ticket for $5, and that was if you redeemed it at the hospital, you were able to get free or get health care for that. So anyways, with that happening, you would get, you'd have to find your way down to that hospital, though. There were no ambulance service, so you were still on your own until you got to that hospital, but you had that hospital ticket. So that was one thing that you could do while you were going out in the woods is selling hospital tickets, but that's not going to make a big living that way. So he also acted as a drummer or salesman for different businesses in Bay City and Saginaw and other towns, other logging towns. And he brought wares like watches and jewelry, nothing ever really expensive, but it was flashy, it was showy. And so the men, would like to be seen, having a nice, pocket watch, a shiny brass pocket watch. I highly doubt they had a gold or silver pocket watch. Or they might, have nice hair combs that they could buy for their sweetheart back home or their sweetheart in town when you hit the Spring River Drive, if you know what I mean. Things like that men would want to buy, for themselves or for a loved one, a wife, girlfriend, so things like that they would sell, and other variety of items too. Many of the camps had a camp store or a van or wanigan, as they were termed in different locations. But those were usually, items for the men: tobacco, writing material, extra clothes, medicines. The patent medicines that were probably more alcohol than anything else, but anything like that, for the men to use while they were in camp. The drummer would bring items that were more of a luxury item, either for themselves or, like I said, gifts to send home, such as Christmas time. So they certainly made their rounds at Christmas. Because some of the men during that short break at Christmas might be able to get home if they lived close enough to where they were working in the camps. But others, it would be relied on to mail them home or, get it to the railroad depot, the closest one nearby, and send it freight back home, wherever that may be. So John Fitzmaurice did his traveling around the camps in the wintertime, and he had a variety of experiences, some humorous, some rather mundane, and sometimes even terrifying. He talked about in one camp where he thought for sure that the men were going to gang up and pretty much beat him to a pulp. But it was all in good fun. They kind of took his merchandise, but only temporarily. They gave it all back at the end, and so he had it there when he left camp the next day. But he had to sleep in a bunk with the toughest guy in the camp and thought for sure, he was going to be beaten in his sleep. Did not happen. The guy turned out to just, putting on airs, pretending he was a tough guy just to, as a joke. There was a lot of sense of humor in the camp, practical jokes, and it was, again, a way for them to pass the time. But so, as I mentioned, he found his way to a camp at Christmas time in 1883. And so I'm going to read from John Fitzmaurice's book that was published in, I believe it was 1888. Let me look at the publication date here for sure. No, I'm sorry, 1889. It was titled The Shanty Boy, or Life in a Lumber Camp. And it was printed by the Democratic Steam Printing Company in Cheboygan, Michigan in 1889. And this is a on-demand reprint that I was able to get through Amazon. There were other reprints done over the years. At Hartwick Pines, we had a reprint that was originally published by the Clark Historical Library, I believe it was, well back into the mid-20th century. And you'll find other copies sometimes in rare used bookstores. But in the case for when I wanted my own personal copy, this is the best I could do. And so I'm going to start reading this. It starts on page 32 of the book. It's the chapter 5, but it's a couple pages into the book here. And it begins with, I shall never forget the Christmas of 1883, spent in a lumber camp. By some fatality, my business had so shaped itself that in place of being comfortably at home with my family during the holiday season, I was far in the interior of northern Michigan. A weary tramp of some 16 miles over a bleak, burned-over waste of desert brought me to a large lumber camp in proximity to the Muskegon River. Some 75 men constituted as fine a crew of shanty boys as I have ever met. It was Christmas Day, and the men were having a layoff in honor of the festive anniversary of peace and goodwill to men. The cook and his helpers had made an extra effort in the preparation of a dinner fit for a prince, and for which I had just arrived in time, bringing with me an appetite suited for the occasion. Dear reader, did you ever dine a la Shanty Boy in camp when the cook had just turned himself loose? If not, let me give you the menu constituting the big dinner on that Christmas day. There was venison, cooked in 3 different forms, wild turkey, wild duck, partridge pie, big as bushel basket, cold and hot corned beef, pork and beans, corned beef hash, codfish with drawn butter, pig's feet, potatoes, sauerkraut, boiled cabbage, beets, onions, pickles, apple, mincemeat, or apple, mince, and lemon pie, apple and currant pudding, tea with milk and glucose sugar, bread and cookies. 2 long tables fairly groaned beneath the weight of the bounties provided, and it was simply refreshing to witness the avidity with which that big crew of hungry men got away with the luxuries, and to which final result the writer contributed his best endeavor. The afternoon was spent in the various methods of amusement incident to camp. Some reading, others letter writing, one mending his socks, another putting a fore and aft deck in a pair of pants with a dissected grain bag. Cards and music were in vogue, the latter represented by violin and 2 mouth organs, furnishing entertainment for a number engaged in the exhilarating excitement of a stag dance. In the far corner, the everlasting creaking of the grindstone kept up an accompaniment to the general hilarity, thus forming the necessary connection between work and play. I soon became quite intimate with most of the men, from the chore boy to the push. The foreman of a camp is usually termed the push, but among them all, I, in some measure, felt myself drawn toward one whom we will term Charlie Porter, who in my estimation was the very ideal of a shanty boy. Porter was justly considered one of the best men in the camp, with either team, axe, saw, or hook. He was a young Hercules in strength and an Apollo in physical beauty. About 26 years of age and standing fully 6 feet in his stockings, clustering with brown hair with 2 great dark blue laughing eyes, brimming full of life and vivacity, presents the picture of this young woodsman. Indian-like, we had smoked a pipe of peace together, and were thus preparing to swear eternal friendship for each other, for in peace as well as war. The Shanty Boy is usually impulsive and very much depends on how a stranger strikes a camp for either comfort or annoyance. I passed most of the afternoon and evening in conversation with Porter, a brief relation of which, as my memory retains it, will exhibit one feature of the vicissitudes of camp life, serving to tell the story of the Battle of the Saw Log. From Charlie's talk, I soon learned that the greater portion of his life had been spent in the woods. He was now on his last winter in camp, to make his last stake and gather enough money to pay on his little farm in Sanilac County, where with his father and mother his young wife of less than a year was living. The loving adoration with which Porter spoke about his wife was a something refreshing in the midst of folly and vulgarity, especially when remembering that the female associates of the Shanty Boy are not always of the gilt-edged variety. Reaching back in his bunk, Charlie produced the photograph of a very pretty girl on which he gazed with fond looks of admiration, telling me it was Daisy, his wife. "She's waiting for me over yonder, pard, she is. Only 1 month in the woods, and my name's Dennis. Then goodbye, Liza Jane, to camp, and raw for home with a good steak and my turkey." He certainly was a noble specimen of masculine humanity, and I thought that, though like Othello, rude in speech, and mother or wife could be justly proud of such a son or husband. His face was fairly radiant with joy as he told of his courtship and marriage with the little woman a-waitin' over yonder, and the pure vision of his wife seemed to pervade the smoky surroundings of the rude bunk camp as he dwelt in earnest the homely language upon the beauty and goodness of his Daisy. It was to me simply reflects happiness to sit and listen to him. "See here, chummy," he feelingly whispered, "I just think I'm about the happiest galoot alive. I don't mind showing you, but I don't want to give it away to the boys here, or to the boys. Here's a Bible Daisy gave me when I left home last fall. She's hefty on religion, Daisy is. See where she writ my name on this year leaf? To my dear husband, Charles Porter, from his loving wife, Daisy. She's a scholard, too, used to teach school, and just for Daisy's sake I kinder like out here in the woods to read this book. I wore a lying in my bunk after breakfast this Christmas morning, a reading about the birth of Jesus and the angels a-singing to the shepherds and sort of thinking how Daisy and the old folks would be a-holding Christmas over yonder in Sanilac, and whether she's sort of lonesome arter here out of her greatest rough Shanty Boy. No doubt, Charlie, she thought about you 100 times a day. You bet she has, and reading this dear old book kinder brings us closer to one another, seemed like. It certainly does, and I only wish I were with my own dear ones today, Charlie. It is a day like this that makes one feel there's no place like home. Right you are, pard. Have another pipe or tobacco. Just get onto this turkey, that was their name for their clothes bag, and see all the socks and shirts and towels Daisy put in it for me. And ha, she put in a feather pillow too, he roaringly added. This idea of a feather pillow in a bunk camp. But I like to look at it, pard, though, and I don't use it. My sweet Daisy's head rested on that there pillar, and as you're to sleep with me tonight, I'll let you have Daisy's pillar to sleep on, and if your dreams are as innocent as my little woman's, you'll sleep well. Thank you, Charlie. I am rather bald-headed, and an overcoat makes rather a hard pillow, so when you write to Mrs. Porter, thank her from me for the use of her pillow. I'll do it, chummy. I've got a letter most finished up, and will send it in by the tote team day after tomorrow. I have writ to tell Daisy I'll soon be home. How in thunder she will ever fancied a rough hemlock knot like me, I can't for the life of me discover. It busts my binding chain every time I think about it. I guess she could tell why if she wanted to, Charlie, I said, looking at this uncut diamond with a face and form fitted for an Apollo. Well, I don't know, maybe, but one thing I do know, and that is that there's a little wife of mine will never know what want is, or lack a comfortable home, while Charlie Porter's on deck. I give you a straight tip on that, partner. And so the evening passed away, till the chore boy turned the lights down and all tumbled in, and soon we were in the dreamless repose engendered by honest toil. The next morning, long before daylight, the camp was astir. Teamsters in the stable, the foreman, Archie McGinley, going about with his lantern, giving directions about the day's labor. Men getting on their warm clothing, cooks busy with the morning meal, while the loaders, having already eaten, took ready for the woods to get to the rollway, where the teams would soon be waiting for them. It was a weird picture by smoky lamplight in black and white, and I lazily lay in my bunk, thanking my stars that I was only an amateur shanty boy and didn't have to go. Goodbye, pard, goodbye. When we met again, 'twill be over yonder in Sanilac County. When the springtime comes, gentle Annie, said Porter, warmly shaking my hand, and he stood with a double-bitted axe on his shoulder, ready to start for the cutting ground. Remember your promise to come and see me and the little woman next summer. We'll be there looking for you, and perhaps someone else, ha ha ha. So long, chummy. After breakfast, eaten in the gray of the morning, I lighted my pipe and sat down to wait for sunrise before proceeding on my journey to the next camp. The morning broke clear and beautiful. Not a zephyr stirred the stillness of the keen, frosty air. The rising sun just began to shoot its rays athwart the tops of the frost-silvered pines. The silence was unbroken, save for the measured echo of the distant axe, as it fell upon the trunk of the doomed pine, of the melodious song of a teamster on the icy road, with his load to the banking ground, come mellowed by the distance. There is a girl in Saginaw, she lives with her mother. I defy all of the world to find such another. Bung your eye, bung your eye. Through the long avenues of pine, the filigree work of the Frost King had silvered every tree and twig with a network of lace, through which the newborn sunbeams flashed with 10,000 scintillations of prismatic beauty. Wow, he could write. The camp was deserted, save for the sleepy chore boy, lazily sweeping out the bunk camp, or the clatter of the tin dishes in the kitchen. The rhythmic thud of the blacksmith upsetting a peavy hook kept time to the stroke of the camp tinker, laboriously hewing out a sled runner from a maple root. The picture in light and shade, touched here and there with brilliant coloring, was one of enchantment worthy the brush of a Turner or a Church. I stood drinking in the varied beauties of this lumber woods winterscape, and felt keenly and warmly the elevating inspiration it afforded. My reverie was, however, rudely intruded upon by the approach from the distant cutting ground of an ox sled, accompanied by a number of men of the camp, and bearing something resting upon a bed of hemlock boughs. Instinctively, I felt that some terrible accident had occurred, and my worst fears were fully established, when on approaching the coming cavalcade, I met a sight I shall ever remember while life lasts. Upon the bed of boughs, saturated with his fast-ebbing lifeblood, lay the form of Charlie Porter, marred and disfigured beyond recognition. Good God, men, what has happened? Rather bad accident, sir. Is it Porter? Yes, all that is left of him. He has passed in his checks, replied the foreman, brushing the moisture from his eyes with the sleeve of his mackinaw. How in the name of heaven did it happen? Oh, the old story, caught by a falling tree, almost the first down in the morning. Get him to camp as fast as possible, boys, while I hurry to start the chore boy for the doctor, and the foreman ran on ahead. Is he beyond all help, boys? I asked. Help? I should say so. Why, he's a smash to a pancake. Get him into the cook camp, boys, and lay him on the table. I have some knowledge of surgery, and will do all I can for him. We soon had his clothing gently removed and the blood washed from his face, but I saw that there was no hope. Nearly every bone in his body was broken, and his labored breathing showed where the breastbone was smashed in. His moments were numbered. A horse and cutter was at the door to drive 30 miles for the nearest doctor. It is useless, Archie, I said. In a few moments he will be beyond all human help. The men stood around their dying comrade, weeping like children, for Porter was a universal favorite. A little stimulant administered caused the departing spirit to stay its flight. Porter slowly opened his eyes, fast glazing with the film of death, and recognized me, made a faint motion, as though to speak. What is it, Charlie? Write to Daisy. Tell her. I will, Charlie. What will I say? Tell her I died, hoping to meet my darling in heaven. They won't be very hard on a poor shanty boy. Daisy loved. And with the trembling accents of human love and trust on his lips, the rude shanty boy went home to God. It was a sorrowful day in that camp. I wrote the letter to the loving, waiting wife, that after enclosing the unfinished letter of the devoted husband, blotted and misspelled, but breathing the love of his manly heart forever stilled. I labored to make the blow fall as lightly as possible upon the afflicted one, but all was in vain, for the young wife and her prematurely born babe were laid to rest in the same grave with him she loved so well. They were loving in life and united in death. This is no fancy sketch, but absolute truth, save in names and location. Men become rich, and the wealth of our country grows year by year, till its expenditure causes a political strife. But the noise of the real fight seldom reaches the front, and the sigh and cry of the wounded rarely rest upon the ear, and every lumber camp has its tragic story of disaster and death as above described. But it is in the lumbermen's hospitals, where the wounded gathered from the great battlefield of the pines can best be held in their multifarious conditions of suffering, telling the battle of the saw log. And that ends that chapter, the story of Christmas in a logging camp. And yes, as I mentioned, it's rather melodramatic, romantic, has a touch of sadness to it with the death of Charlie Porter and the premature death of his wife and child. But that was what people wanted to read in the 1880s and up into the early 1900s too. So a lot of the histories were written that way because they wanted to get as many readers as possible. And, the histories that we write today, the type that I write included, aren't all that dramatic compared to what they were writing in the end of the 19th century. And so, I'd like to believe we contain, much more fact, and we have a lot of the, records, sources behind it to prove that it's the truth. But, when you're telling stories, and this is really what Fitzmaurice was doing, he wasn't recording history so much as he was storytelling. And you could storytell about an event that would still give you an idea of what it was like there, but also make it an interesting, compelling story that you wanted to listen to, or in this case, wanted to read. And that's exactly what we have here today. But it does show, first and foremost, that as opposed to most other days in the logging camps, on Christmas Day, they had quite a feast. Now, they ate well in most camps because you really did, they worked from their stomach. The more they ate, the more calories, the more energy they had to do that long day's work out in the forest. So they had plenty of food, but here they had venison, wild turkey, grouse pie, so a lot of wild animals that they hunted out in the forests at the time period. They also had corned beef, they had pork, so a lot of salted, canned, different types of preserved meat, mostly beef and pork. That was done the easiest. They didn't eat a lot of poultry in the camp. If you had chickens in camp, it was for eggs, not for meat. And they had a lot of variety of other foods in there, a lot of potatoes, a lot of beans. Those were mentioned in there. So wide variety of food. And they had lots of desserts. Cake was very popular. Pies. There they had pies, 3 different kinds of pies in there. So really good food there. And their entertainment, it wasn't like, a Christmas show or anything like that, but you always had the ever-present musicians in camp playing their instruments, in this case a violin and mouth harps. Those were either harmonicas or jaw harps that they were playing there. There were other instruments that might be brought to camp. I'm a banjo player. I own a banjo. I don't know how well I play it. But banjos were found in logging camps. In fact, it was because of working at Hartwick Pines, I chose to pick up the banjo as opposed to other instruments because I knew there was historical precedent of banjos being played in the logging camps. But you had accordions or concertinas, the different, very similar instruments that could be brought to camp, especially with a lot of European immigrants, very popular instruments with them. And so things that were nice and handy that could be carried with you. No camp had a piano as far as I know. And guitars might have had them, but it was not real common in the Northwoods. Those tended to be more in the South, particularly the Southwest with a Spanish and Mexican influence. But so instruments were always something they did. There was storytelling in the camp, but they had to do their tasks too, like knitting, sewing, mending their clothes, putting in fore and aft decks. That's extra padding into them, patches into their pants because they would wear out and get rips in them. And so you're patching them and putting in whole extra sections in there, particularly in the seat of the pants to make them last the season. So they were doing the end letter writing, as was mentioned in there before, and you had conversations, with friends or new friends, like with John Fitzmaurice and Charlie Porter. So that's an idea of life in the logging camp, and then yes, it ends with the sad story because you had to have your tragedy in the forest when you were writing about the logging camps in the 1800s. And Fitzmaurice did just that and ended it on the sad note of Charlie Porter's death. So thank you for listening. And yes, like I said, there's going to be a little bit of a hiatus, but I am happy to say that we are nearing 3,000 downloads of the podcast. On this day a year ago, I started with 0 of them. So I think it's been a pretty successful year for the podcast. I've picked up a few supporters, but boy, I would love to get a few more. It really helps my budget here. I have a monthly bills of podcast hosting, that subscription for that, along with a subscription for the music licensing for my intro and outro music. So if I can get that down to almost nothing with your support, as little as $3 and up to $10 a month, a recurring one there. And I promise I will do a better job in thanking everybody have supported me. That will be one of my New Year's resolutions. I want to improve this podcast greatly in 2026. I can see it growing very well. And, that will start with getting me back in recording here. And I hope to, like I said, start that up again here very shortly. I did have to take some time off while my mom wasn't doing well. And sadly, she passed just a few days ago. And instead of, sitting here in my grief, I need to be productive. So I got this recorded that I always plan to have this one to listen to on Christmas Day. And I'll start working on other ones real soon. So thanks for listening. Have a Merry Christmas or season's greetings for all of the holidays going on this time of year. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa that begins tomorrow. Any other holidays or celebrations you celebrate. The solstice was just a few days ago. And Happy New Year for coming of a hopefully great 2026. So thanks for listening. I'll be talking to you real soon. Bye. North Country History with Rob Burg is hosted, written, and produced by Rob Burg. Music is Crack o' Dawn, performed by Reveille, licensed through Soundstripe. Follow North Country History with Rob Burg on YouTube and on Facebook at Rob Burg, Environmental Historian.